That the debate so far has focused very little on the subject which is discussed most often in the media and in the public sphere, which is Pakistan. I wonder whether our panelists are shying away from discussing Pakistan openly today. And I would not like that, but I don't think a foreign policy debate will be over without a serious discussion on Pakistan. I wonder, like all Indians do, where does this optimism and implicit faith that some sections have in Pakistan stem from? I am only saying this to provoke the debate. Open debate round, interjections coming in from both sides. Interjections, time for interjections. Interjections from this side, 30 seconds, 1 minute response, and we'll keep it flowing after that. This is the interesting part. You're interjecting whom?
Okay, the first interjection is for Mr. Manish Tiwari. We've been talking about, firstly, as Sauradeep said, our timing is amazing. Our pressure on Pakistan is building up as US is withdrawing from Pakistan. First and foremost, I would like to ask you, sir, that isn't the timing supposed to be relative to India and not relative to America or the global scene? Because we need to put pressure on Pakistan when the 26/11 attacks happen and not when America decides to leave Afghanistan. First thing. Second thing, sir, what I would like to say about what Rajal said is that it's a utopian idea for us to consider that we will be able to protect the Indian diaspora wherever we are. When the Italian Marines come and shoot the fishermen in India, Italy being such a small country, they have the guts to send their diplomat and exert diplomatic pressure over India. And we being such a large country shy away from doing that, and we cannot protect our Indians wherever they are. This is sort of a paradox compared to what our standing is. And another thing that I would like to say is that someone mentioned about how, again, I think it was Rajal who mentioned that a governance in India should be first solving the problems that India has inside of it, like we can't protect Indians inside of India. I think this is where we're failing in demarcating where our foreign policy makers are and where the governors of India are. The people in India need to take care of India, and the people in India also need to take care of the people outside of India, because,
well,
let me complete
your question very briefly.
Yeah,
you cover too many points, you won't get a quick interjection.
Yeah, so my last point was that our policymakers need to understand that as much as we protect Indians inside of India, that is a problem within India. The internal ministry needs to handle it. Well, what is our Ministry of External Affairs doing?
Well, let's Manish Tiwari answer that. Manish.
Well, first of all, I think it's completely erroneous to make any foreign policy debate either Pakistan-centric or China-centric. Having said that, Pakistan's policy towards India, the policy of bleed India with 1,000 cuts, or the K2 or whatever you would like to call it, emanated after we liberated Bangladesh. So therefore, it's been a continuum over the last 30 years. And notwithstanding that continuum, Pakistan has not been able to constrain India either in its growth or in achieving its rightful place in the world. Now, let's step back for a moment and look at this entire problem from a slightly different angle. We have been successfully able to achieve dehyphenation with Pakistan. Pakistan continuously endeavors to re-establish that hyphenation. Is it in India's interest to have that hyphenation back? That's the first question we need to answer. The second question that we need to answer is that vicious foreign policies have a way of recoiling on themselves. And the classical example of that is Pakistan itself, which allowed itself to become a frontline state in the Afghan jihad. And the implications are for everybody to say. The third thing is that we must remember that talking or conversations is not appeasement. The United States of America is an ally of Pakistan. They have huge problems with Pakistan. They found Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. They never stopped talking to Pakistan. The European Union is still talking to Syria. The Americans, after 30 years, are talking to Iran again. So therefore, a conversation or negotiations does not mean appeasement. I do not think there should be a confusion between the two. And this knee-jerk reaction that every time there is a terrorist outrage by non-state actors who want to disrupt the tranquility of South Asia. You know, you go into this mode, we'll not talk. And the last thing I would like to say, Mr. Brahmachalani raised the point about, about the region. Allow me to just complete.
The second interjection.
Just allow me to complete. You see, I think somewhere we've gone wrong, Mr. Chelani, on our Monroe Doctrine. The decision that we need to make with regard to our neighborhood is, do we want friends and allies or satellites? The problem is that we've dealt with our neighbors with a big brotherly attitude, and that has only resulted in more problems than solutions.
I request the panelists to respond to the specific interjection which has been made, but interesting formulation Manish Tiwari puts there of a vicious foreign policy. What really would be a vicious foreign policy is a question to add. If the Prime Minister of India equates Pakistan with India as a victim of terrorism, that 2 months after the July train bombings in Mumbai in 2006, would it be vicious for the Prime Minister not to do that? Is a question which is there. And would it be far too assertive and vicious and dangerous for India to speak for national security within its own soil? Is a question people are asking. Ravi Shankar Prasad wants to respond. After that, I'm taking an interjection from this side. You want to respond, sir?
Well, my good friend Manish Tiwari said foreign policy is not punches and counter punches. It's a chess game. I'm sorry, punching and counter punching is an integral part of management of foreign policy. Who is not willing to talk to Pakistan? It is our neighbor. But talk at what level? Not talking at the summit level is also a part of diplomacy. And what we said, let some smaller people talk, not the Prime Minister.
Americans will never speak to any other country at summit level after an attack.
Now let me ask a straight question. Yes, it is very important. It was wrong to say that Pakistan is a victim of terror. It is wrong to say that dialogue will be insulated from the action against terrorism. The problem with Pakistan is who is controlling the military establishment of Pakistan. Are the political leaders or those in the ISI? Unless that remains, yes, they are suffering today, but at least we ought to have exposed them, and summit level talk was completely uncalled for.
Allow me to just respond to that very quickly. Allow me to respond to that very quickly.
I was just completing. I was just completing, or no? Then he can.
I thought you yielded, and he gave it.
No, but let him. I'm quite welcome his reply. Since you mentioned about Mr. Bajpayee, you are entitled to mention. After Lahore, if Kargil happened, Pakistan was contained, and then we declared a ceasefire. For 1.5 years, Agra happened. Agra also failed.
Sir.
Once Musharraf acknowledged that Pakistan will not allow its territory to be used against India, only then a further dialogue could take place. But therefore, past is past. But what is important is Pakistan will have to be understood in the context of its hostility. About China also, he has to respond. It is well he can respond that.
I think he wants to respond.
Well, China is not a lonely power. China is an assertive power, is an ambitious power. And China cannot be seen to be pushing India around. And our honorable foreign minister will say in Beijing that Beijing is a lovely city. I'm sorry, that does not give a very right impression. Therefore, China is a neighbor, but China has to be told that India is also different when it comes to shop.
Well, I don't think it's appropriate to make this into a Manish Tiwari versus Ravi Shankar Prasad debate. But allow me to very quickly respond, and which goes back to whether I think it was convergence of thinking between Mr. Goswami and I, which rarely happens, when he started off by referring to Kargil and then, or rather Lahore, Kargil, then
it was completely
the Agra summit and the parliament attack, followed by Operation Parakram, which incidentally blunted the only instrument of coercive diplomacy which was available with us. And then on to the SAARC summit in Islamabad in 2004. And Mr. Chelani, if that wasn't engaging at the summit level, then what else was it?
Okay.
And coming to China, since he raised the question of China.
I'm not defending Vajpayee.
I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about Mr. Vajpayee. I'm talking about summit level engagement.
Yes,
if this wasn't summit level engagement, what else was it?
And for that, we are paying the price for that.
Well, I don't think we are paying the price for that. The fact is that that Pakistani territory and a lot of Pakistani territory is unfortunately ungovernable space, which is controlled by non-state actors, which is not really under their control. That's a reality which we are not willing
Manish
to
Tiwari, the gentleman, young man out there, raises his hand for intervention.
Also ask the question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mr. Manish Tiwari, you mentioned that the R2P doctrine as a theology is unacceptable to India. Am I right? You said that.
Well, I said two things, R2P and the theology of values in the context of EU, which keeps moralizing. So I said two things.
So the R2P doctrine by itself, you're saying, is not a part of our Indian foreign policy, or it's unacceptable. Well, we can separate the implementation of that doctrine in Libya or wherever. But the doctrine by itself, the term R2P may have been introduced by the Americans, but the very first example, perhaps in world history, of a humanitarian intervention of a military nature was in 1971 in Bangladesh by India. So how can that be unacceptable to India? First question. Second question, speaking of the Maldives, when an Islamist coup took place, an Islamist and Islamic need to be separated as terms. When an Islamist anti-India coup takes place there, and our government is unable to do anything about a pro-India government being displaced, furthermore, they actually remove an Indian company, GMR, from there, and we are unable to act in a tiny country like that. Then, sir, we talked about Sri Lanka as well. The UPA government initially voted against Sri Lanka in the UNHRC. Later, the second time it refused to do so. So what was the change of stance all about? Why are we pandering to a certain section of our Tamil vote bank?
Can I request you? The point is, I know you have a lot of points to make.
One last point,
but
sir.
interventions must be brief. Otherwise, responses
One last
will
point,
be
sir.
longer.
I'm
getting a response.
One
So you
last
made 2
point, sir.
points.
One last
Okay,
point.
quickly.
And sir, you confess that we have a big brotherly attitude towards our neighbors. That is a confession coming from you, which helps this side of the motion. Why do we have a big brotherly attitude, and why don't we engage with them on equal terms if we can?
Well,
Thank you.
Once again, I need to respond. Well, let me do so. You see, the difficulty with the right to protect is that the right to protect has 6 elements. The use of force is the last element. Unfortunately, that gets prioritized first. And in the case of Libya, it was not the most perfect state. But after the intervention in Libya, the kind of sectarian conflict that you find in Libya, I think leaves much to be said about R2P. Now, coming to your second point, which was with regard to Maldives, as to why we are not able to protect our assets even in our neighborhood. I would like to take you back to 1988, when there was a coup d'etat in Maldives, and President Gayoom made a call to late Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, and we intervened and we restored the government of President Gayoom. So therefore, over a period of time, I think we have not calibrated our policies towards our neighborhood in a manner which is nuanced. And coming to Sri Lanka...
Are you therefore accepting the motion?
Well, I'm not accepting the motion. I'm only making
the motion?
See, it's not about accepting or rejecting. It's a statement of reality in terms of calibration of foreign policy. With regard to Sri Lanka, you are absolutely correct. You see, we nuanced our policy. With Sri Lanka, geostrategically is important. We need to engage with them. But yes, where there's an aberration, we need to put our foot down, which is what we did.
If we could be assertive in 1988, why not in 2013? Assertive in 71, why not in 2013? What's changed? I want a call of hands right now. How many in the audience believe that India's foreign policy is not in line with global expectations? I'm just taking a call of hands. That's well over 80%, I think. How many feel it is in line with global expectations? Global aspirations?